All right, we'll wait a little bit to make sure everybody can get into our Zoom meeting. Okay, looks like everybody who's coming in has come in. We can get started. Thank you, those of you who are here in the audience. Really happy to have you here with us today. This is the start of a series of opportunities for representatives of the City of Larkspur to engage the community. We're going to be talking about some of the issues that we've been hearing about from the community, some of the concerns that we're observing, some of the feedback that we've gotten, and some of the issues we want to address. With me today, I'm Dan Schwartz, the city manager for the City of Larkspur, and with me today, the fire chief for the Central Maryland Fire Authority, Reuben Martin, and then also the Public Works Director for Larkspur, Julian Skinner. This is our first community update as we go through a very brief talk. If you have questions that you want to type into the Q&A section of the Zoom room, please do so. When we're done, we'll open it up for Q&A and start a dialogue. Following this meeting, there's going to be other opportunities that we'll be announcing for in-person get-togethers to talk more about the issues that we've identified and that we potentially want to address with the community going forward. So this is just a start, and we hope to offer up many more opportunities. With that, what I'd like to do is go through a very short presentation that sort of gives you the highlights of what we're going to be discussing. And I will, whoops. Shannon, I need you to enable the share screen for me. Okay, thank you. Okay, hopefully folks can now see the PowerPoint up on the screen. We're going to be talking about disaster preparedness and infrastructure issues this evening that we've heard from the community quite a bit over the last few years, concerns that you have. We've been doing some polling, we've been doing some one-on-one engagement, we've done some community meetings. The council has conducted a number of public meetings to hear from the community over the years about what your concerns are. And our focus is always on maintaining your quality of life. It's about keeping you safe and protecting your health and well-being. And that's what the theme is this evening as we go through our presentation. So, you know, one of the things that we all have to accept now is that natural disasters really have become a part of everyday life. And we're working hard to address the concerns that we have about how we're going to cope with natural disasters. And the community has been very supportive when we've asked for resources in the past. And we think that there's a possibility of us doing even more to prepare our community to be safe during a disaster. And one of the things that we want to talk about are some ways you can help. As you know, we're facing earthquakes. That's probably always been one of our top concerns. And then more recently, wildfire has become topic number one in our area. And there's always the concern about flooding. And those who are longtime Larkspur residents remember the days when streets were pretty badly flooded. And of course, we still have looming the possibility that PG&E will have to turn our power off either as a preventive measure or it may go down as a result of disasters. And those present some serious challenges for the community. I'm going to turn it over and let Fire Chief Reuben Martin talk about some of the fire prevention work we're already doing and some of the things that we're hoping to address in the near future.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you everyone for here tonight. As many of you are aware, 2017 really was an unprecedented year. And then every year subsequent to that, we've been seeing wildfires ravage the North Bay. We've been very fortunate here in Marin that it hasn't happened here, but yet it's just a matter of time. So the voters in Marin saw an opportunity for us to then address some of the wildfire issues, not only here locally in the community, but countywide, and passed Measure C in March of 2020, which created the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. And what that does, it provides a funding mechanism, or $20 million that are then brought back into the community, that then your local agencies, like for us, the fire department, can then go ahead and address some of these issues that we've had of overgrown vegetation, maintaining our evacuation routes by removing a lot of invasive species, weeds that are encroaching on the roadway that'll eventually impact us if we have to do a large scale evacuation. We've also been able to utilize Measure C funding for larger scale projects. For example, one is the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, which is in the planning phases, which hopefully we'll implement later this year. It's a 5 to 6 year project that basically creates 1 to 200 foot shaded fuel break behind every home that impacts within Larkspur, that impacts or is directly related and neighbors of the Marin County Open Space District and Water District lands. It's almost creating kind of a little bit of a buffer that would allow them firefighters to then to get in there and try to extinguish the fire, or allow community members that extra time that they need to get out. But with that, our primary concern is our evacuation routes, and maintaining that evacuation route comes more than just evacuating during a wildfire. Because typically right after wildfire season is we start getting into our winter months, which then create much more issues if we have a fire in the area and we're unable to get all of that water runoff to go somewhere. We then tend to have the possibility of debris flows, and it's something that we want to try to avoid. We saw some of that a few years ago down in the Santa Barbara area, where they had these massive wildfires come through, and their current infrastructure couldn't maintain the amount of water that came down, and then created this massive debris flow. This massive debris flow that then impacted the entire community with mudslides.
Okay, hang on for 1 second. I, of course, am having a technical difficulty moving to the next slide. So hang on for 1 sec. All right, let's try that again. Hold on. Sorry, folks. That's why it's our first time doing it this way.
While Dan works on that, I'll kind of continue a little bit of else what we've been doing on the wildfire measure. Some of the things that here within the city of Larkspur that we've done is we've identified our key evacuation routes, especially coming out of vulnerable neighborhoods that only have one way in and one way out, and trying to improve everything we possibly can for the neighborhoods to be prepared, not only to be able to maintain their own vigilance, their own resiliency, but to be able to help us out by taking care of a lot of their own defensible space. And part of that is done through our defensible space inspection programs. That's been highly supported through the community. Is where we go out and educate each individual homeowner on what individual hazards are on their properties, and also try to educate them on how they can best be prepared in the event of a wildfire. Do they know the ways out of their neighborhood? Or do they have their go bags? What are they doing internally within their communities to become more resilient? So that's some of our disaster preparedness work that we've been doing. We've also been working with grassroots efforts that's been from the ground up with our neighborhood response groups, which have played a huge role in preparing each other's neighbors on how to be prepared. It's the concept of neighborhood response groups is the neighbors helping neighbors concept, and identifying areas within their own personal neighborhoods that then we as fire departments can go in there and help either assist with education, assist with disaster preparedness, or try to mitigate some of the fuel hazards that exist within that community. turn it back over to you, Dan.
So along these lines, as we think about disaster preparedness, one of the things that we now know as part of our life, part of our landscape, is the possibility that we're going to experience power outages, whether it's power outages because of a disaster or whether it's power outages because PG&E has chosen to turn the power off out of concern for wind or other fire risks. Larkspur has been lobbying for there to be a central location for the Central Marin Fire, Central Marin Police to provide a cooling center and a power area for folks while the power shut off in the community. And unfortunately, none of our facilities met the criteria that PG&E's established for that. So one of the concerns we have for the community is we want to have that type of center. We think some of the properties that we currently own or share with other entities like the Hall Middle School gym have the potential to serve that purpose with modifications. And so we hope that we can, in the near future, invest in our infrastructure to provide those safe locations for people during these difficult challenges like a power outage. All right, Julian, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about some of our flooding and sinkhole challenges.
Thank you. So one of our, for the most part, unseen portions of our infrastructure that we're responsible for maintaining is our storm drains. These are pipes that are underground and serve to direct the rainfall runoff that lands on the streets safely into the creeks and bodies of water. They're an essential part of any street construction project, providing adequate drainage for not only the street, but the neighboring areas. Many of Larkspur's storm drains are beyond what would be commonly referred to as their serviceable life. Some of them are upwards of 100 years old, and many of them are over 50 years old. And when pipes get that old, they tend to start either coming apart or disintegrating or breaking due to prolonged earth movements. And this is problematic in a number of ways. One is when these pipes become compromised, they don't function as intended, so the drainage doesn't work as well, and you're not able to take the drainage off the road and have it get to the creeks to clear the roads. But you're also running the risk of, when these pipes can pull apart or deteriorate, some of the neighboring soil that's under the street and around the pipes can make its way into the pipe. This can make its way into the creek. But as this soil starts to disappear from around the pipe and under the roadway, you can end up with what are called sinkholes, which is essentially where the street starts to get eaten away from underneath around these storm drain pipes. And then it gradually, as more and more of that earth gets into the storm drain pipe, it makes its way up to the surface, and then your pavement fails, and you end up with a big hole at the surface of your street. We have had a couple of these in Novato, and in the news recently, I think folks may have seen that there was one in San Anselmo. These are sinkholes that are related to storm drain failures. And so we have a network. Everywhere you see a street, there's typically a storm drain running under it. And many of them are older and in need of repair, and in some cases replacement. This is doubly important in the case of natural disasters and events where we may need to do evacuations. You can imagine evacuations are complicated if you have an issue on a major road where you have a big flooding event and you're trying to move people out, but you have a storm drain failure or a sinkhole. These often happen when you have big rain events because there's more water rushing through the pipe, and there's a tendency for that to cause the ground around to erode quicker and cause a sinkhole. So it's, in order to keep these critical major roads open for evacuations, it's imperative that our storm drains underneath are in good shape so that we can keep the roads intact so that they can be used as intended. Here's a couple of slides. The one on the left here is the inside of a storm drain. Basically, these are pipes of varying sizes that carry the water. And then on the right, this is a repair for a section of pipe that failed at one point, and it was replaced after a storm. Our intent is to inspect our storm drains throughout the city and come up with a plan to repair and replace. They're a lot more expensive to repair when they fail after the fact. It's a lot more cost effective to have a plan to manage these and inspect them and do the repairs before you have a road failure. In those cases, you're doing repairs or replacements just to the pipe itself, versus when you get a sinkhole, you're often replacing the pipe, the road bed, the pavement, the sidewalk, and it becomes a lot more expensive.
So returning to the topic of evacuation center, we want to make sure that folks are comfortable no matter what the disaster is. And so that's, again, what we think is a critical component of the evacuation route mapping that Chief Martin was talking about. We need to be able to coordinate everything and send people to a safe place. And so increasing the services that we can offer at some of our larger facilities would be critical in any emergency. Let's see. Sorry, there we go. Ruben, you want to speak about our neighborhood response groups?
Sure. So one of the big key components of disaster preparedness is how resilient our community is in the event of one of these major events, whether it's fire, earthquake, flood, and to be able to prepare them through education and training, and then more importantly, through much needed supplies. Our neighborhood response groups, as we mentioned earlier, is a ground roots effort of neighborhoods coming together, that understanding that in a major disaster, whether it's an earthquake, flood, fire, it is more than just what happens here locally. It happens regionally, and it impacts the fire service throughout the entire county, which then puts the community members basically fending for themselves for several days at a time. And so the neighborhood response groups were spurred out of a few community members that took some of our more advanced community emergency response team or CERT training and or get ready program training. They realized what we had just said earlier, that you're going to have to fend for yourself in one of these major disasters. So they brought back the information that was given to them, and they began to share it amongst their neighbors who potentially probably couldn't have time or didn't make those kind of trainings that were offered. And so they basically started the neighborhood response groups, which is the neighbors helping neighbors concept, or how can we become resilient, self-sufficient in a major disaster, whether it's learning how to sandbag, learning how to shut each other's gases off, putting small fires out with fire extinguishers and so forth, and with some minor advanced first aid, basically being able to stop the bleed and so forth. So all those trainings are invaluable to a community. And the more people that we have that are trained and can be self-reliant makes the entire community more resilient.
So why are we kicking off this process with this meeting? Part of it's to build awareness of the issues that we're hearing about from you. And part of it is make you aware that we are conducting a survey to hear what is the most important issue on the horizon for you as a resident of Larkspur. And so you can go on our website, www.cityoflarkspur.org/disaster preparedness, and you can complete this survey. We also will be sending the survey out in the mail, and folks will have the ability to return postcards to the city with your thoughts on what are the issues we're facing and how important are they. we want to incorporate that feedback into our planning as we go forward to make sure that we're meeting your needs while continuing to do the best we can for your public health and safety. Now, as part of that, it's important that we do all of this while we maintain the fiscal stability of our city, and we maintain the heritage, and we maintain the property values that we've established in Larkspur. So now is the time to be having this conversation about how we can be better prepared for natural disaster and how we can address our storm drain needs, our infrastructure needs, our disaster preparedness needs, so that we can move forward. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to those of you in the audience to see if you want to ask any questions. We're here as long as we need to be to engage you in conversation. And so please go ahead and use the raised hand feature if you'd like to ask any of us a question. Whoops, I'm going to turn the share screen off. Well, I'm not seeing hands raised right now, but maybe a few thoughts before we go. The city, I think, has, under the stewardship of the city council, done a remarkable job taking the monies that have been entrusted to us by the community and investing it in Larkspur. And I think the photo that's behind Julian there is reflective of that. The community entrusted us to go out and get federal money, match it with local money, and rebuild our bridge. We actually rebuilt 3 bridges. That, of course, is the Bon Air Bridge behind Julian. It's going to be a safe structure that will be part of our community for years to come. And of course, in the last several years, we've had a lot of success rebuilding our roads. We now have one of Marin's best road systems. We've got 1 more year before we'll have touched every street, I think, in Larkspur by that point. And that has a major, not just quality of life improvement factor, but helps us in coping with disaster. It allows our fire personnel to move more freely through the city to get to where they need to go. It allows our police to do the same. And of course, it makes everybody's quality of life better. And so one of our purposes in kicking off this discussion with the community that will be going on for the next several weeks and months is that we have other needs in the community where we think with your support, we can address these challenges and make the quality of life in Larkspur all the better. And still not seeing any hands up. There is a Q&A though that has come up from Amy. She's thanking us for the work we've done, especially with the NRGs and the certs. You're welcome. I think the great thing about the NRG program is it really is, as Ruben said, neighbors taking care of neighbors. I often feel guilty that we get credit for a program that we just sort of nudge a little bit and then it takes care of itself because people in Larkspur care about each other, and that's fantastic. Okay, we do have some raised hands now. I'm going to allow phone number ending in 1402, which looks familiar to me, so I think it might be James.
Yeah, hi, James Holmes. Yes, we hear in the news a lot of reporting of huge amounts of infrastructure funding available from the feds. At this time, do we have a sense of what kinds of funding we will receive from the various congressional acts that have been passed?
It's still very early in the process, James, but a couple of things we have been able to determine. Every community will receive a small amount of money. And small may not be the right word. I think Larkspur might be in line for a 6-figure amount of money, very small. on the lower side of 6 figures, just to invest in infrastructure. The other thing right now is there's been a call for projects, but what we've been told is that there's a strong emphasis on bridges after the concern of what happened in Pennsylvania, but also on public safety. And so we've actually been coordinating with Corte Madera to see if we can qualify improvements to our fire stations under the infrastructure money that's come out. It's still very early in the process, so it's hard to say if, you know, will be an attractive project, but we'll do everything we can to be so.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay, looks like Susan Beatty.
Hi. I actually live in Corte Madera. I don't live in Larkspur, but I care a lot about all our neighboring town. And I have a question. I believe I heard you say that when you were talking about the space that Larkspur would want to have for people to go to in the case of an earthquake or something, that PG&E did not, you didn't have a facility that would meet with PG&E's criteria. And I just wondered what that criteria was, because it feels to me like you should have that space.
Well, I certainly agree with you. I was surprised. A lot of it has to do with roadways in and out of the community, because PG&E is trying to work with the County Office of Emergency Services to identify 3 or 4 key locations around the county that they would invest in to be those central locations. And I think because of roadway access for a variety of communities, locations in San Rafael, Marin City, Nevada scored higher than we did, but we certainly pursued it in coordination actually with the town of Corte Madera, because we felt that particularly a location like Hall Middle School gym makes a lot of sense. It's easily accessible for both our police and fire to help in those situations. So I do feel like now the community needs to figure out how we're going to do it for ourselves. Yeah, it's a little frustrating for me because I view the Twin Cities community as the center of my universe. So I can't understand why PG&E didn't see it that way too. But
well, so it sounds like it's something though that you could do as a town, as opposed to you. Why would you have to have PG&E's authorization?
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe, yeah, PG&E was actually willing to do some of the investment. They were going to put in the generators. They were going to upgrade some of the other facilities so that it wouldn't be a burden locally.
I see.
And unfortunately, we weren't selected for that.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm sure you'll come up with something. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else want to ask us any questions while we're here? Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any other hands. I really want to thank everybody who took some time off out of your evening to visit with us. Our contact information is on the City of Larkspur website and on the Central Wind Fire website. Please, reach out to us, ask any questions you have. And those of you, particularly those of you who belong to neighborhood response groups, homeowners associations, we'll be reaching out. We'd love to come talk to folks about the challenges that we're facing and get some one-on-one feedback. So we're looking forward to this conversation and headed toward an improved Larkspur. With that, I'm going to say good evening and thank you again for attending. And Shannon, are there any housekeeping issues to address?
Last thing before we sign off, in the next couple of days, the PowerPoint and a recording of this meeting will be available on the disaster preparedness landing page on the website, along with the poll Dan shared earlier and some information we have. So certainly if you know anyone who wasn't able to attend this meeting and might be interested, it'll be available for the public and members of our community.
All right, thank you, Shannon. And with that, I'm going to say good evening and thank you to everyone.